Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Cycle Podcast. I'm very excited for today's episode. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. Lily and I met on Instagram and we started just chit chatting, and she's an RD, a registered dietitian. She can tell you more about that because she's an expert, not me. But she also has endometriosis. So I'm very excited to talk to her today and hear her recommendations and what she thinks is best for us sufferers, and just help us with some scientific education. So Lily, with that, thank you so much for being here. And if you can help introduce yourself to us, we'd really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Melissa. I'm so excited. Yeah, so my name is Lily. I live in Long Beach, California, and I'm a registered dietitian. I live with my husband, who's also a registered dietitian, Nick, and our very fluffy dog, Miley. Um, I studied at Cal Poly Pomona here in Southern California, and I also received my Master of Science in nutrigenomics and nutrigenetics, which essentially is a study of how your genes, our genes, and diet and environment interact. They're very interesting. I wish there was more research in endometriosis, but there's some, and we can kind of talk about it a little bit after, in the end. So I'm very excited. Thank you for having me once again. I just, your speakers and guests that you've had on before are very inspirational. Their stories are incredible. And as much as I thought I knew, being in the healthcare field, there was so much that I learned from all of them. And hopefully I can do the same for the listeners.
Well, we really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Well, I want to dive right into it, but first I'd like to hear just a little bit. You have endo. Can you just tell us a little bit about your endo story before we get into the, diet and what we can do?
Mm-hmm. So I started my period when I was just about a week shy of my 13th birthday. And I remember my mom was more excited than I was. She's always romanticized the idea. She was looking forward to it. It's saying you're going to be, you becoming a woman, and now you can have kids and a family. And it's just very, she spoke of it very fondly. And I remember getting it and thinking, this kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Being a middle schooler and dealing with the logistics of having a period and having to carry around my pads and everything. And I don't remember much of it being bad initially. I just remember them being very long and kind of heavy, about 7 days, 7 to 10 days. And it wasn't really until high school that there's symptoms started showing up. They were a little bit abnormal at the time, but I didn't know that.
Sure.
Of course. And I remember a handful of times at least that I would get, especially the first day of the period, I would get pain so bad that I would be just crying, shaking, feeling like I'm going to faint, and just being in the fetal position on my bed and just wondering when it's going to be over.
Yeah.
And I did talk to my parents about it, and there's a couple of times, and I think they just didn't really know what to do also, because my dad would be like, well, should I take you to the emergency room? What do you want to do?
Right.
And I we can try giving you Tylenol or Advil and see if that works. And that's kind of how I coped for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
And that tended to help with the help. And it was nice that I could take over the counter, and I was able to get it down to, I feel like it was a manageable pain.
Sure.
I don't think it was ever gone, but it was tolerable.
Right. You could still go to school potentially and function.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And then in my early 20s, I remember at that point I was going to college, sexually active. I did go on birth control for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that helped with the symptoms. And I think a lot of it was masked at that point, because I remember, but the one thing I remember that was interesting is that, my periods became more normal, lighter. The cramps were a lot less. And I remember thinking, wait a second, now this seems normal. Before, right. that didn't seem like it was supposed to be that way.
Right. I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I just remember thinking, well, okay, I guess I'll stay on this for a little while. But then I was studying nutrition, I was studying, health, and I kind of, after a few years, I decided that I wanted to go off of it because I didn't want to have the synthetic hormones in my body. And I'm like, what is it doing to me? What is, how is my future going to look? And I think I just understanding the life cycle much more, understanding that there's times you can get pregnant, times you can't, obviously understanding the ovulation cycle. I was like, well, I should know when to, when to kind of abstain, when I can go. So able to track it and, being a dietitian and type A personality. So I love my little data tracking.
I do the same thing. I use an app. I mean, I've been using an
Yeah.
app for like 10 years. It's great.
Yeah, same here. Same here. It's the same one. And I have years worth of data on there. It's great.
Same. It's actually been, for anyone who's listening or watching, it's actually been very helpful to me, the data, to see like how many days in between. I don't record all my pain on there. I record my pain separately, but it is very helpful to track it. And then, yeah, it tells me when I'm ovulating and when I should abstain. I did the exact same thing you did.
Yep. Yep. So I went off birth control and I expected my period to restart at some point. I know it can take up to 6 months, but I didn't get it for almost 2 years.
Wow. Wow.
Almost two
How old
years.
are you at this point? Are you still in your 20s, late 20s?
I was trying to think. I was trying to remember. I think I was probably mid, like 25, 26.
Did you feel in those 2 years, did you have like cramping or feel weird or like sick at
No,
all, or you just felt normal?
no, actually it felt normal,
Wow.
but I just didn't get a period.
Wow, 2 years.
2 years. And I was, a busy college student still, and I was kind of just didn't, I definitely thought, maybe the birth control is still in my body. Maybe there's still, kind of waiting for, that reset button. My body just has to kind of restart on its
Right.
own. I did go to student health services, and I remember talking to the physician, and she kind of dismissed it as like, it's stay in your body for a long time. I've seen girls that don't restart their periods for a year, and I'm like, well, yeah, but it's been 2 years.
Right.
So they gave me, so they did actually try to give me the morning after pill, which is like a high progesterone dose to try to induce it
Yeah.
3 times.
Wow.
And yeah,
Okay.
3 times, and it didn't work.
Wow. Okay. So what happens after that? One day it comes back though. I have a
It
feeling.
did. It did. It was kind of like one day, it just kind of started on its own. And I was like, oh, hello.
There it is. Were you in a lot of pain when it came back?
No, I don't remember being in a lot of pain when it came back, but I do. I think when I really started, right around like my late 20s, is when some of the symptoms started coming back. But this time, a lot worse than before.
With the
A lot
benefit?
worse than I remember them in high school.
Yeah.
This time, I remember I started running a lot. I was doing half marathons, and if I went too far too soon, or if I felt a little bit of the cramps coming on and I didn't stop and walk for a second or sit down for a second, it would kind of cross this line, and then I'd just be keeled over on the curb when everybody's running by me, and I just needed like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you feel nauseated and you feel your stomach is hurting, and it was just awful. And I remember thinking, well, this is weird. What is happening? Is it just like, and everybody's like, oh, you got to drink more water, or it's just a cramp, probably, whatever. And I remember feeling symptoms definitely before, about a week before my period, and about a week of, I would have just, lethargy. I would be tired a lot. I would feel foggy. And again, it's, premenstrual syndrome. Everybody's like, oh, it's PMS. That's just what happens. It's normal.
Right.
But over the counter meds continued to bring my pain down to a manageable level. So I didn't really think anything of it. And it's funny, it's like also you talk to people and you talk to them about your symptoms. And a lot of people say, oh, I have that too. I have very painful periods, and I have that too. And I think their perception of their pain and my perception of my pain is very different, but it validated it didn't validate what I was feeling. Instead, I was like, well, I guess everybody goes through this.
Yeah. No, It's funny that you say that because I feel the exact same way where like friends would be like, oh, I'm down with my heating pad today, but they took like 2 Advil and they were fine. I was like, oh, you don't take 3 Advil every 5 hours so you can
Yeah.
walk, like, so you can, like, so you don't pass out, you
So you
know?
can stand up straight and actually straighten out.
Yes, yes, yes. I feel very similar, and that's why I thought it was normal too.
Hmm. Yep. I think the perceptions are very different between, yeah, what others feel. Um, so I guess around my late 20s, I think I was around 29. It was in a previous relationship, but we did start wanting to get pregnant. And at the time, a little life's cruel little joke is that I'm working with dietitians all day where, they're healthy, young women, very smart, and we're all working together, and every one of them is starting families and getting pregnant. And it just seemed, I feel like my little worlds of the dietitian world that I saw my friends, it seemed so easy
Yeah,
for them.
right.
And I never really gave it a second thought that I might have issues. So I waited a long time. I went to school for a long time. I started my first job. And I just thought, it's fine. I'll just wait my late 20s, early 30s. I have time. I have plenty of time. I'm still young. So when I started trying to get pregnant, I think I was 29. And I did get pregnant on the first try. So once again, I was like, well, see, it is easy. And that was probably the last time I felt like it might be normal. And that's when everything kind of started. Within a week, I had a very painful miscarriage. And it, the pain of that miscarriage was something different. And I remember thinking, well, obviously, I'm miscarrying and it's probably, and I remember walking to the doctor's office and just tears just streaming down my face, and I didn't understand what was going on. And, we did an ultrasound and there was nothing there. So it was probably an early miscarriage, and she said, you can try again. You're still young. It'll happen. So I went, and about 8 months later, nothing happened, but until 8 months, I remember I had a period and it was kind of lighter than usual. It was about 2 days. And, my period was they're a little erratic anyway. So didn't really give it a second thought. And once it stopped, I continued spotting. I was spotting for a week, and then I continued spotting. That was 2 weeks. And I was like, something's off. So I started Googling what's going on. I'm spotting after my period. And of course, you see like cervical cancer. I'm getting,
Right.
yeast infection, everything from, ranging from an infection to like cancer,
Right. Everything under the sun in Google. Yeah.
everything. Nothing talked about, and of course there's miscarriage or ectopic pregnancy, stuff like that. Nothing about endo still. And I remember thinking something's off. And I did call to make an appointment that night. And the nurse that I spoke to over the phone, she's like, before your appointment tomorrow, why don't you just take a pregnancy test just to make sure? And I was like, well, I just got my period. I'm like, that's impossible. But I did, and it came out positive. And at this point, I've been so intuitive with my body, and I kind of know what's going on. I just had a feeling that something's wrong.
Yeah.
Like this isn't normal.
Sure.
Something's off. And by next morning, the pain kind of radiated towards one side, and I kind of just had a feeling. And I went to the doctor, and he did an ultrasound, and once again, he said that he saw a lot of fluid around one of the ovaries, and he had a high suspicion that it was ectopic and it was bleeding out. So
Mhm.
they got me emergently into the OR right then and there to try to do an exploratory laparoscopy and kind of see what's going on, and potential removal of the ectopic pregnancy.
Right.
And that was, I think at that point I was 30.
Okay.
And that's when I remember coming out of anesthesia, and the physician was there kind of hovering over me. And the physician looked at me and she said that, yes, it was ectopic. You're about 7 to 8 weeks along. It was too big, too much damage. They had to remove the tube. They checked the other side, the other tube and the other ovary were fine. And also they found traces of endometriosis.
Okay. So that's
I
when you
found
finally find out that you have endo.
I have endo. That's when I finally found out, and that was 2013. And it was at that time she said it was moderate, probably like a stage 2,
Okay.
because they found most of the lesions were they call it in the cul-de-sac, so it's kind of like behind the uterus.
Hmm.
And that's all she said to me. And she said that you could have issues conceiving in the future, and that, but it's not impossible, and that kind of have like a follow-up appointment with her later.
Okay. How are you handling this all emotionally? This is a lot in 8 months to deal with.
It's it's a lot, especially going from this is going to be so easy to all of a sudden now I'm, you know, and I've had a miscarriage. At this point, I had an ectopic pregnancy, and now I have this diagnosis that I don't really know what to do with,
And
and
did you
that could
even know what,
potentially
did you know what endo meant? Yeah.
no, no, never heard of it.
Yeah.
And I must say, um, for years, having the diagnosis didn't really give me any kind of advantage. I still didn't know what to do. I still didn't know what it meant.
Right.
Because if you Googled endometriosis in 2013, it just said that it causes severe pain and it might have issues conceiving or fertility.
Hmm.
Didn't really give you many options, didn't really say anything about treatments. I
Right.
feel like it just kind of was, it is what it is. You have it, and you just, there's the things that could come with it, and on you go.
Right. Right. No, for sure. 100%. I felt the same way. It was just like something you live with and that's it.
Yeah, yeah. And so emotionally, I I went through. It's weird, but the great thing is that once you start sharing these stories, once you start talking about these things, you realize that so many more people have gone through it as well.
Yeah.
And that's when people I worked with, friends, all of a sudden were like, I also had a miscarriage when I was young, or I also had an ectopic pregnancy. Things that people don't really talk about, but then when you share your story and they start sharing theirs, and you start feeling like it's not just you, the burden is not all on you.
Right. You feel less alone because someone else is going through the similar thing as you.
You do feel less alone, but at the same time, society is not exactly kind to you can't have kids if you can't conceive children, so you just start feeling inadequate. I
Mhm.
had to battle with being angry, feeling inadequate, feeling like, is this, like my mom said, when I got my period, it was so romantic, now you can have children, and there's the one thing that I can't do.
Right.
So it was a little bit confusing. I definitely had to, just make sure that I talked about my feelings, kind of tried to compartmentalize what was going on and really look at it realistically, and also just have a plan. I mean, you have plans and you have visions and you have dreams about having a family, what my kids would look like, the names, and now I had to kind of think about, what if I don't? What's my plan? Like, am I okay with this?
Right.
Making the, having your body kind of choose for you is very different than you making the conscious decision to not have children. And it
Yeah.
was okay. I mean, it's just something that I had to go through. There's a lot of emotions, and it does take a long time to kind of go through the stages and get to a better point.
Yeah. And you have to take care of yourself now too. Like, oh, I really need to make myself a priority. I wasn't even thinking about this, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, because everyone in the beginning, everyone's so romantic, they don't know that this might be a very difficult thing to do
Hmm. Yeah.
until they're actually in it. Yeah.
And it was
So,
also, and I'm around people and friends again that are now in their second cycle of their children, and they're just, oh, I'm so nauseated, or I have so much heartburn, and there's just a lot of complaints, and this is so hard, and I'm like,
yeah, you have a different perspective.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it does make you feel very isolated, and you do have to make sure that you kind of find the coping mechanisms and understand that that's going to happen,
Yeah.
and you truly are happy for your friends. It's a weird feeling of being really happy for somebody, but also being really angry on the inside.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things that endo has taught me is just empathy in general. Empathy for yourself. If you see someone and you're not jealous, but maybe sad or angry because you can't do the same things that they do, but then also empathy for them because, like you said, you want to be really happy for your friends who are able to do more than you or have children. You don't want to be resentful almost to them. So for me, I just try to always be empathetic and be if they are complaining about things that seem ridiculous to us because of everything we've been through, I just try to come from it like they don't understand what it's like to be us, and I don't understand what it's like to be them. That's just how I try to approach things more and more as the years go on, because otherwise you're just upsetting yourself at that point, you know? And I was
Yeah.
doing that, and I finally was like, I just have to come from a place of like being super empathetic. And it helps. It has helped me a lot.
Mm-hmm. It
So,
also helps to have a strong support system. And you're absolutely right. It just also making sure you're, kind of separating those two things. And it just takes time sometimes.
yeah,
It takes time.
it does. It takes.
Um, so moving on, I think I remember starting at that point, I'm in my early 30s and starting treatments for IUI.
Mm-hmm.
It's like what is it called? Intrauterine insemination. So it essentially is just your body still has to do the entire process. Your body still has to ovulate and the egg has to get fertilized. So a lot, but they just make it a little bit easier. They kind of you get medications
Yeah.
that make multiple follicles grow at once to kind of like try to make you like ovulate, more than just one follicle in a month, because I only had the one tube at this point, and make it easier to kind of just like shoot the sperm up directly into the uterus so that it kind of just a little bit of assistance.
You're right, there's no distractions, right? It's just
There's
goes
no, yeah, to the
goes right up
point.
in there. Yeah.
Exactly, straight to the point.
Right.
So I did that for 3 cycles,
Okay.
and unfortunately the ovary that was so the ovary that the tube was gone, when the tube was gone, was kind of like beating the other one to the chase, to the punch. So 2 of the cycles got canceled. One cycle just didn't seem like it was going well. I feel like I went in and they're like, oh, I think you might have already ovulated, but we can still do it. And it's just kind of, I just felt like, my body was kind of fighting the medications and not quite following the trajectory that they thought it would.
Right.
Because they're thinking, oh, it's one or the other. It's like every other month, we'll just, if this one took over this month, we'll just go with the other one next month. It should work that way, but it didn't.
Right.
So, yeah.
I
So
only
then the
have
doctor.
Yeah, I only have one ovary, and I thought, oh, does this mean I will have my period every other month? And they were like, no, it will figure it out. I was like, oh, okay, great.
Oh,
But I didn't know
right.
that could happen either. But that whichever ovary may have been stronger for you was the one that was doing the work, right?
Exactly. And that's what I didn't realize either. I thought it was just half and half. And then, you know, and at this point, I don't know what the endo is doing. I don't know if there's a lot of things that were not disclosed to me as the patient that
Yeah,
I found out later, even from that surgery alone.
for sure.
So let me just kind of quickly get through. So did the cycles, the doctor sat down with me and she said that let's try Lupron. They wanted to basically shut down everything and can like basically manually control the process. Because if you shut everything down and then you start doing the medications, they can control more of what's happening and which one is, they can hold the ovulation for some time, and make sure that the right one is the one that's all of that. And I remember just listening to her, and I remember just kind of like my eyes kind of glazed over, and I thought to myself, you know what? And I'm so glad that I did. I need a break.
Good
I'm
for you.
like, that sounds extreme.
Yeah.
Whatever she was saying, I was like, I'm like, I'm 32. I need a second. I can't. That sounds like a lot.
Mm-hmm.
No, no, I'm sorry. I was 30 or 31. It was still pretty much right after the top of pregnancy is when this whole started. So,
Yeah.
had some life changes in the next couple of years. At this point, I let go of everything. I just decided I just need to take a break from trying to conceive. I need a break from, and then, like I said, I had some life changes and I just needed to kind of reboot a little bit and get myself in a better place.
Yeah.
Because it's exhausting.
And you went through a lot in such a small period of time. And I think sometimes we don't realize, because we're so strong and tough, and we are type A, like you said, and
Yeah.
then it's like almost when someone like comes to sit with you and talk to you like that, you're like, I do need a minute, you know.
Mhm.
I felt like that after one of my last surgeries. Like I was doing all these supplements and all this stuff, and I was just like, I just stopped everything. Like
Mhm.
I just couldn't. Like I stopped going to acupuncture. I just was like, I just need a break. And I'm guessing you felt the same way, because it's a lot at once, and sometimes I think we don't realize how much it is, and we need to
Yeah.
just take a step back and breathe. Okay,
That's exactly right.
clear your
And I
head
think,
too. Like figure out what you really want to do now.
because it's tough with fertility, there's so much pressure and you become like a robot. It's like, now it's this, now it's an ultrasound every other day, and now you have to do this, now we have to do this, and then we have to come in again. And it's just, you start obsessing so much about the actual logistics of it, and just kind of like, and you lose track of like why you started all this in the first place.
Yeah, that makes
You
complete
know,
sense.
am I in a good place to do this right now? Am I in a good place even to have a child? Am I maybe rethinking some of the choices that I made, or like maybe I want to change jobs, and just kind of like, I think you lose track of what everything else is going on in your life, and like kind of lose a sense of yourself,
Yeah,
because you get just so engulfed in this whole fertility journey,
sure.
and you're racing the clock, because now I'm in my early 30s, and it's just, it's just a lot. And I needed to take the pressure off myself, and I needed to figure out my own, like I said, my own self, my own life, and what's happening. And I just needed to take a break for a couple of years.
Good for you. That's really good.
Yeah.
So now what
Uh,
happens? You take a break, then what happens?
so I met who's my husband now, who's amazing. And I think that's also just a big part of why I am in a much better place, and I'm a-okay, because he's just supportive, non-judgmental, just incredible. What can I do? What do you want me to do? And I asked him, please just research this disease on your own. It'll save me a lot of time, and it'll save me a lot of just sanity. Just, can you please just look into it yourself, understand it? And he did. He like podcasted this really boring webinar.
That's sweet though.
It's so sweet. And there's like a Q&A section. It was like 2 hours long, but he came back and he's like, oh, I see now. I understand a lot of the things you're going through, and I can tell when you're battling. I can tell when you're just, kind of putting on a smile for everybody. And like, he's like, I understand, and he's like, if you ever need to just not, just, it's okay to stay home or whatever. But now, fast forward a few years, a few years went by. We're, we actually did end up changing jobs, which is great, because I wouldn't be where I am today for just if I didn't take that break, if I didn't just kind of regroup a little bit.
Right.
Ended up changing some of my lifestyle habits, really started kind of trying to understand what's going on, because at this point, everything that I feel like the doctors have put me through was the endometriosis was secondary. Nobody ever talked about what's happening there. Why am I not, why is one of my ovaries is not quite doing the job that the other one is? I feel like I just needed to kind of understand what was going on first, and also, and just, see if I need treatment potentially. And there's really still not much out there at that point. I'm still, if you read about it, you get the same information as before.
Yeah.
Painful periods, infertility, blah, blah. And everybody was like, oh, you don't need IVF. You'll need IVF probably. And that was the other thing. Like, well, financially, it's a little difficult to afford IVF. So,
Yes.
Okay.
And
so
people don't talk about those. With IVF and the IUI, you're putting more hormones into your body, and this disease is estrogen dominant.
Yes.
So it's almost like you're fueling this disease, but of course no one was telling you that, because they were only focusing on the infertility part. They were not focusing on the endo part at all.
Exactly. It's probably thriving and it's doing its thing, and it's just kind of spreading, and I have no idea that it's happening. And my disease is not as evident, as not painful. It manifested
symptomatic.
Is not as symptomatic, not as, so I kind of didn't really think too much about it.
Sure.
And I had my uncomfortable periods, but it wasn't as, I guess, as, you know, it wasn't as intrusive in my life. And it was, I kind of was still not really paying too much attention to it and not thinking about it. I just figured, you know, my body, my other ovaries should be able to be okay still. So we'll kind of figure out. At some point, though, a few years in, we, you know, moved in together at this point. We did decide I'm a little older and I should probably, you know, we can start trying to conceive again and seeing what happens. But I gotta say, this time my entire outlook was very different.
Yeah.
Let's try this. Let's see what happens. I'll continue working towards my goal of trying to save for the IVF. Maybe there's some scholarships. There's like always, you know, different avenues that kind of help with IVF or that journey, and kind of celebrities even that have had IVF, they do like donations and stuff like that. I'm like, let me just start looking into my other options. Meanwhile, we'll just kind of try to, you know, see what happens naturally. And again, ended up getting pregnant for the first time. And same thing happened within about a week. Same thing, early miscarriage. I woke up, no symptoms, and I just knew, I'm like, this is weird.
Yeah.
So very similar to the first one, very early miscarriage, heavy period. And then my hormone levels went back to normal. So at that point, I'm like, it's not going to happen naturally. I just had a feeling. I'm like, we need to pursue other avenues. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So last year, I started working at Kaiser, and there is some assistance with fertility at Kaiser, which was incredible. I'm so thankful just to have had that. That I didn't realize. I started working here because I wanted to, but I didn't realize it was like extra little icing on the cake. And we did do IVF right around this time last year, actually. And we, you know, at this point, they stimulate both ovaries, and it's kind of an equal chance for both. And I didn't have a ton, but we ended up getting, I think, 8 eggs out, and 6 of those fertilized. 5 went on to do the genetic testing, and we do have 2 normal embryos frozen right now.
Okay, so that's wonderful news.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay.
So that gave me a lot of peace of mind, but I just, you know, with that journey, it was actually kind of fun. It was like, you know, like I said, a different mindset. I was ready for whatever outcome was going to be. And it was okay at this point. It was going to be, I had to give it a try. I wanted to have that insurance in case I, you know, we do want to in the future. And the good thing about it is you can always, you know, as the doctor said, I can prepare your uterus for the embryo at any point, but we want to get your eggs out while they're still genetically normal.
Right.
So you don't wait too long. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And so kind of what I alluded to earlier about things that I didn't realize or didn't know. I got kind of when I started listening to your podcast right around this time, and I started really delving into excision surgery and specialists and trying to look for what's going on. And I started having suspicion because multiple times in an ultrasound, a physician would say, I feel like I see something in your uterus. It might be a polyp. And now I'm thinking maybe it's endo that's in my uterus, which is why I keep having these early miscarriages and it just doesn't really stick. So, but these are my own, you know, just
for sure
educated guess.
Yes.
But I kind of, I wanted to find out what's going on. And then also, it came out during my IVF ultrasound randomly. One of the ultrasound techs was, you know, doing the ultrasound, and she was like, oh, I see your cyst and your right ovary, there it is. And I'm like, wait, what cyst? And she was like, you didn't know there's a cyst there? And I'm like, I did not.
No.
I did not know there's a cyst there. And I'm like, well, how big is this cyst? And she goes, you know, it's probably, because I told him, like, I have endometriosis, so it's highly likely. And she goes, oh, then it's probably an endometrioma, like a chocolate cyst, like a blood-filled cyst. And I'm like, I did not know this. Mm-hmm. So that's when I pulled my medical record from the surgery in 2013. because I did do an X lab and I wanted to see what they found.
Yeah.
Now I started actually asking different questions, which is one of the things that as you get more educated from that, they came from your podcast, and the guests that you've had on is just, you start asking different questions. You start wondering, is there something else going on? And, I think I also started kind of realizing that just because a physician sounds confident doesn't mean they're knowledgeable about the endometriosis, especially.
Yeah.
So that's when I started just pulling, and I'm not going to be, I'm not like trying to advocate, I'm not trying to be my own doctor and trying to, do anything, but I really just wanted to see what was on there that wasn't told to me.
Yeah, you have to be your own advocate,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
And you've probably heard me, everyone who listens to the podcast has heard me say, I don't blame the doctors. I really don't. Yes, they should be more educated, but they're not. So at this point, we have to keep fighting for ourselves. And like you said, you have to change the narrative of the question.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't blame them at all. And it's, I think, I'm hoping it becomes a little more widespread. I'm hoping that, I just would love for the physicians just to say, yeah, you're right. Let me give you a referral to somebody who does know more about this. But
right.
I still see, I still get that physicians just want to take it on themselves.
Yes.
And they say, oh, I got this. I can do it. I've done it before. And I'm like, well, and I'm like, I don't want to insult them either. And it's just this weird, uncomfortable.
Oh, I don't, at this point, I'm like, yeah, I really appreciate what you're saying, but I need to find someone else. Like, I don't care anymore, but yes, I know what I empathize with what you're saying, because it's tough situation. Yeah. So where are you right now? Have you researched some doctors? Are you thinking about excision?
Yeah, so right now, well, unfortunately, I had a surgery scheduled for earlier this month, and that was canceled.
Yes.
As we are in this pandemic. And but I'm also grateful because this was just going to be an exploratory surgery. Okay. And I actually now know a physician that's in the Los Angeles area that has had that 2-year specific minimally invasive gynecologic surgery training, that I'm going to go see her after everything's kind of blows over, and then we are back to scheduling,
And now maybe you'll just be able to have one excision surgery and no exploratory surgery.
Yes. Yes. And the cyst is very, it's like, I think what she said was 4.2 centimeters.
Yeah. And if it's an endometrioma, you have to get it out. Yeah. Because those chocolate cysts will just spread. If it ruptures, it'll just spread more endometriosis in your pelvis.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And I also, I'm glad I held out, because I want to, we did this whole IVF. It's a journey. It's mentally taxing. It's taxing on your bank account. And I want to do it right. I think the physician, when I asked her, what about my endometriosis? Will it affect potentially the implantation, the pregnancy? And her answer was kind of like, it shouldn't. And if it gets bad enough later in life, you'll just have a hysterectomy. And that's when I realized, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to try to figure this out and work on this first myself. And then I'll go back to the fertility clinic and do the whole, finish the second half of the IVF journey, I guess. But I think I need to figure out, because, it does create a toxic environment in your pelvic area. It does create inflammation. And what kind of environment is that for the little embryos to stick? Yeah. So I wanted to take care of that first.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's one of the bigger problems with IVF and IUI too, is that potentially if you have excision surgery first, it will make things go a lot smoother, because like you said, it's a toxic environment. You don't know if endo's blocking something, or so it sounds like you're on a really good path. That's
good.
Good.
It's good news. I'm excited. I'm definitely, having done that, I think it took a lot of the pressure off too.
Yes.
Now I can actually take care and focus on my own health and focus on what's happening, and then see if maybe later, like in a couple of years, we can then go through.
Right. You have your backup plan. So it sounds like you're in a very good place with all of everything that you've done, though. you should feel really proud of that. I mean, all the research and everything you've gone through has really set you up to this place where now hopefully everything will just work out smoothly for you.
Yeah, yeah, I hope so too. But yeah, but right now, I mean, I'm definitely bummed about it because the symptoms are getting worse
Of
as I
course,
get older.
because you need surgery too. It's
I
just
need
like
surgery.
your body is like, oh, you need surgery, but COVID-19 is here. I'm just going to give you some more symptoms to remind you that you need
Yeah,
surgery.
as you're waiting this out, just I'm gonna get worse, so that's
Yeah,
fine. And
yeah,
the tiredness, the fogginess is worse. The
yeah,
getting up in the morning is a challenge, especially that week of
yeah.
I just feel it's a whole like I haven't I just, it's just your energy is just drained and you just feel like a different person.
I I literally remember like going to Costco with my husband on Saturdays and being like, I felt like I was walking through Jello. Like this is years ago, and I was like, what is wrong with me? Like I slept really well last night. Like I still sometimes even now when I know fatigue is a main symptom, I question myself. Like, am I
Hmm.
really this tired? Am I
Yep.
being lazy? Like, but you know the difference though, like the feeling, all I can do is describe it as like I'm in a Jello mold and I'm
Hmm.
just slowly like slow-mo video trying to get through it. That's how I feel, and that's how I know it's like endo fatigue versus like just normal fatigue. It's hard to describe how it feels if people don't understand it, but
That's that's a I love that. That's a good comparison. It really is because I was trying to think what it felt like for me is kind of like my mind is not catching up to what my physical body is doing. It
yeah,
just takes like slow motion. And I
yes,
feel like if I turn my head this way, my mind hasn't turned,
yes.
that way either. So just kind of it's just everything's just a little bit delayed.
I don't understand it. I think it has to be, again, not a doctor, but I like to speculate. It
Hmm.
has to be the inflammation. And I do think, and I say this all the time, I think we're in more pain than we actually think we are. And our
Yeah.
body is trying to compensate for that. And so we're exhausted. Our bodies are exhausted. They're just like, please rest. You are in pain. But our mind is like, let's go. We got a to-do list, travel. We got to do this. You've got patients today. I've got work. And you just keep pushing, pushing. Sometimes I'll push until I'm like literally in so much pain I have to lay down. I'm like, why do I do this to myself? But
Yeah.
part of that type A thing that I can't, I mean, I've slowed down a lot, but
Yeah.
I can't get over. I don't know how to change it, you know?
Yeah, no, and I try. That's what we're gonna talk about some of the things that like
Yeah,
lifestyle and diet, and I definitely try to implement some of these things. But it is hard because you get so wrapped up in your own little world, your job and your relationships and your friendships and family, and you want to maintain and still have fun and doing all these things, and then when you pull back finally, you're like, oh wow, I'm really tired.
yeah,
And
and you feel the pain even more
yeah,
too. But well, I
and
think that's a great, thank you for sharing all of that with us. And I think that's a great segue into, so you're a registered dietitian. I have 1,000 questions for you, but well, we might have to do a second episode. But just to start with, what are some initial recommendations or things that you do for yourself? Because there's so much hype. Inflammation diet, dairy-free, gluten-free, soy-free, hormone-free. What should we do? What do you do? That's, I think, a great starting point because there's so much out there.
yes, there is a lot out there, and I could probably answer all 1,000 of your questions, but that would be a very long episode because I could talk about so many things.
Yeah,
Um, and I think what the main thing I just want to kind of touch upon is that I don't want people to get overwhelmed.
yeah,
Some of the things that I'm going to talk about
sure.
because it is very individualized. It is something where the not very fun answer is that it's going to have to be individualized to yourself. And that's a lot of times why people usually have to have multiple sessions with a dietitian, really going over your symptoms, your journey, and kind of looking at what we can change and what we can try. And if one thing or two things resonate with you from what I'm going to talk about, great. Start with those one thing. Start with one or two things. You don't have to drastically alter your entire life and your diet and overhaul everything because that's really hard. You already deal with enough stuff as it is. So some of the things that have helped me and that I do is one of the things I actually heard on your podcast, and it's not really diet related, but I stopped using tampons. And I don't know why it's made a big difference in my pain level.
It's crazy, right?
It
Crazy.
is crazy. Yeah. I started religiously taking my prenatal vitamins. There is a lot of, well, not a lot of, but there's some evidence stating that, there's some correlation with vitamin D deficiency and endometriosis, and a lot of endometriosis sufferers also have intolerance to dairy, which is a lot of where the vitamin D and the calcium comes from. So I think just having that supplementation is important. I do also supplement with fish oil.
Okay.
If I don't eat a lot of fish that week, I try to at least take a couple of pills, not necessarily every day, but every other day or so.
Okay.
Make sure that you get a supplement that's, don't buy the cheapest one that there is. Make sure it's a good supplement, it's actual fish oil, and not like krill oil, and that, it's a better quality. One of the things also, I am in a position now where I can go into work not as early, so I do make sure I get a lot of sleep. I notice a huge difference with sleep. Even if I'm not necessarily getting good quality sleep, but as long as I at least am in bed for like 8 or 9 hours,
Right.
some of those hours I'll get some good sleep, and then I feel so much better.
Yeah.
So much better.
A lot of
Yeah. Hydration, super important. Hydration obviously helps with muscle cramping, and I think there's a lot to that. I try to drink a lot of herbal teas, so like a lot of turmeric tea, because curcumin, that has shown some anti-inflammatory properties. I should be doing this more often. I recommend it a lot, but I don't always get to it. Kind of getting up and starting my day with warm water and lemon also has some anti-inflammatory properties, and it really helps with just kind of set up your digestion for the day, and I feel like it eases a little bit of my stomach issues and heartburn.
I need to do that too. It's such
Yeah.
I was good for a while, but I fell off the wagon.
It's hard to not start your day off with coffee.
I know.
Because you just need that wake up a little bit, especially because we're so tired in the morning, trying to just get our day started.
Right.
But yeah, the coffee I've cut back on a lot. I went from drinking at least 2 cups a day to now I'm like, I need about half a cup just to get started. I would like to wean myself off completely, but I haven't, I do like the taste of coffee, and it's nice.
I mean, I drink decaf now, like a little old lady, but I like the taste of coffee too. So, and it has a tiny bit of caffeine in it. I'm tricking my mind that it's delicious regular coffee. That's fine.
It's actually a very good idea. Yes. And the hydration, I can't stress enough how much water I try to drink during the day, and I, stop using anything plastic, no plastic water bottles, no plastic containers for to-go food. Everything's either glass or I have the little that are usable bottles. I'm drinking water constantly. I cut out pretty much any like diet sodas, no juices, nothing really that's, I just try to stick with water.
Yeah.
Stick with water or tea.
How much water do you think like the average person should drink? There's always that 8 cups of water a day. It's 8 cups of 8 ounces. I personally try to drink 100 ounces a day. I don't always achieve that, but that's my personal goal. I do feel better when I do that. It helps with my bowels too.
Yeah, it does. Honestly, that's a good start. There's not like a specific, it's usually like if in a clinical setting, it's about like, what is it, like it equates to the calories, how much you're eating, what you're also drinking. If you're drinking a lot of like caffeine, then you're getting dehydrated. If you're having alcohol, you're more dehydrated. So I think my recommendation is just to not necessarily how much you're drinking all day, but just make sure you're drinking constantly. That if you are, drinking alcohol, drink water with it. It'll help you with the next day. It'll help you with your digestion. It'll also help just keep you hydrated.
Yeah.
I think my recommendation, like I said, is just make sure that you're, and we do these things called water challenges. We kind of just, if it's been a few hours, I'm like, water challenge, let's do it. Drink water. So that's a good start. Like 8 cups a day, it's a good start, but kind of just depends depends on
The individual person. Yeah.
it is. It does. It's a good question. Yes. Some of the things that I stopped using, some lifestyle factors, like I try to exercise.
Hmm.
Having been, in this COVID-19 era, it's a little bit easier because I have more time on my hands.
Yeah.
So I actually did download some apps, and I do stuff on my yoga mat here at home. I just been walking a lot, hitting my 10,000 steps every day, and also kind of got back into running, getting back into running again like I used to. So that's been really nice. And I know it's not always, your body's not always on your side when you try to exercise.
Yeah.
But on the days that you do feel good, it's important to keep your body, kind of fit. And I think it does have a lot of long-term consequences that are very beneficial.
Yeah, even if you can only do a couple laps around your house, it will help get the blood flowing, reduces the pain. I mean, that's been very big for me too.
And I think just stretching and yoga type exercises, especially for stretching your whole core area.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us can, during the time when I'm in pain, it's, you kind of just, you hunch over and you tense up so much that you kind of need to, I think, release some of the muscle tension.
Yeah.
So that's been very helpful too. Some kind of like mobility and just, stretching kind of exercises.
Right. Right. Okay.
And then lifestyle, kind of skip on that. I stopped using any aluminum deodorants
Mhm.
because it is also a toxin, it accumulates, and I think I'm just trying to minimize any like toxins that I'm exposed to as well, trying to go organic for most food. And I stopped, one of the biggest ones is I used to be vegetarian many years ago, but I stopped, I'm a little more of a flexitarian now, but I stopped eating red meat or pork.
Yeah.
There is a lot of evidence that has shown that high consumption of processed meats um, and red meats and just fatty meats has increased the risk for endometriosis and can actually make the symptoms worse.
Yeah, and along that line too, parabens for people, that's something I got rid of a few years ago too. So check your shampoo, check your
Yep.
lotions.
Yep.
A lot of them are going paraben free now, but that's actually
Yes.
it's a plastic, and our bodies can interpret that as an estrogen. And that can, again, there's some research, but not enough to really say. But the more natural, the better, I think, for people with
Mm-hmm.
endo,
Yeah.
as much as you can afford it.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. Um, so that's kind of, I have my little list. That's what I'm looking at.
Yeah, no,
I've made a lot of changes. There's some that I'm not, like I said, I haven't quite gotten to some of them yet. I still enjoy my glass of wine.
yeah,
It's also a matter of how it makes you feel. I don't have a lot of issues with gluten or alcohol, so I try to not eat as much during not as much gluten during the time of my symptoms are worse, because my digestion, you can just tell, like the heartburn, um, the IBS, everything gets worse about a week prior and about a week of,
yeah.
and then your body just kind of miraculously gets better for a couple of weeks.
The inflammation, I feel like, just kind of sets everybody off. So really, I mean, it's hard because everybody's so different and everybody reacts so differently. And I feel like
Yes.
gluten is always such a big debate. Um, how do you feel, like, should people just test gluten and dairy, keep a food diary? I mean, what would you recommend if someone came to you and said, I have endo, my stomach is always a mess, keeping a food diary, maybe kind of tracking things, removing, adding back in?
Yes. So I definitely recommend journaling. So not just keeping track of your diet, but also, and also, just to kind of touch upon journaling of your diet, make sure you journal everything, any supplements, any probiotics you take, because you never know. For a while there, I thought I had a gluten intolerance, and it was actually a probiotic that I was taking that was really irritating my stomach. And I didn't attribute it to, because I'm like, that's supposed to be good for you.
Of course.
So it was actually something else. And making sure you really track everything, your pain levels, when you start, when is your period, what did you eat, also what did you do specific, maybe you didn't get enough sleep or you were very stressed out at work. That's why I like my little Fitbit, because it gives me my heart rate, It
Mhm.
tells you how you're sleeping, and it gives you a little bit of an indication of what your body is going through, because that has to do a lot with it too. It's not just always diet related. But yes, journaling. And as far as what you're asking about gluten, very common in endometriosis. There was a study that looked at participants that were off of gluten for about 12 months had a marked just improvement in their symptoms, and up to 75% of participants. So it's very common, and also very common. What there's not a lot of research out, not a lot of articles, but there's some that I've read that people that have celiac disease, which is a gluten allergy, where you have a severe reaction, your body attacks itself basically, are at an increased risk of having endometriosis. So I wouldn't put it past to where those two are somehow potentially, or just the gluten intolerance and endometriosis are somewhat related. It's just, I think it's so multi-genetic,
Mhm.
that we've identified a lot of genes that it has to do with endometriosis, but I think there's so much more, which is why we get such variability between symptoms and pain levels and people's reactions to different foods.
Right, right. I think, and that's a good tip about, again, gluten testing it. I recommend, because look, I've met people that can eat gluten and they're okay and they have endo, but I definitely severely recommend it because I did get rid of it and it really helped with my day-to-day pain. It
Yeah.
really did help removing it out. So what about one of the main symptoms I feel like that I still suffer from, and I did have a bowel obstruction, and so I had to have a bowel resection. But before that happened, and still even now, I struggle with nausea. Like I can't get past it. I mean, it was much worse before. Um, and I couldn't eat, but I had a bowel obstruction. I didn't know. But now it's still something that I know I struggle with personally, but a lot of people in the endo community just before their period, during their period, random times throughout the day. I do ginger to try and combat it, but is there any other advice that you have for kind of taming that nausea?
Yeah, I experience that sometimes too, and I think the heartburn makes it worse. And my mornings, I can definitely tell that from years ago, my mornings are a lot worse now. It's just that feeling, that kind of a, for lack of a better word, like a gagginess,
Yeah.
and you just get that, like, yeah, absolutely. It's kind of hard. You're right, ginger, always good for nausea. I think if it's severe, I would maybe talk to the physician about getting some kind of like an anti-nausea, antiemetic medication. But what helps me is just drinking water. Lemon water helps because that tartness kind of helps. And also just making sure that I'm very like just cognizant of if I'm eating late or if I'm eating high fat foods, that can always make it worse. If I'm eating fast, because I do that at work, and then I notice that right after my stomach is just like not happy.
Yeah.
And you get so hungry, and sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, I'm starving, and you eat so fast, and then you have to kind of try as much as you can to take the time and eat slowly. And a lot of it is just, fluids, maybe not with the meal, but between meals, so that you're not feeling that fullness all the
Yeah.
time. And then just kind of, and also I noticed, it gets worse when I take a lot of ibuprofen because it irritates the lining of your stomach. It irritates my esophagus. So trying to, as much as I can, not take it if I don't need to, obviously, other than my period.
How do you feel about digestive enzymes? Any opinion?
Um,
Do those help? Do those help and break down food? Does it help your stomach? Is it just kind of a sham? I don't know. Some people have been like, you need to eat papaya. I'm like, but like papaya chews or something. I've never tried it, but just thought of it right now.
no, I mean, there's some digestive enzymes you can take, like for lactose to break down certain foods, but unless you know exactly what it is that you're struggling with, it's kind of hard.
Yeah,
I haven't really seen a lot of stuff on that, to be honest. I'd have to look it up.
I
I
don't
don't
know.
want to say that I haven't, but I really haven't heard much about it. But I also do want to touch upon something that I think a lot of people might not know. It's some of the things that IBS can also be caused by a lot of foods that are called FODMAP foods. I don't know if you've heard of those. It's like they're like basically just small chain like carbohydrates and certain sugar alcohols that do not absorb well, and they can cause a lot of symptoms such as like IBS, bloating, diarrhea, and I think a lot of, because you try to cut out whole food groups, but these are different foods that potentially could help with some of the bloating. So if you do, it's FODMAP, look up high FODMAP, low FODMAP foods, and that's something that has really helped people, to alleviate symptoms of IBS and bloating and constipation, diarrhea, and all of that.
Yeah, I think that's really, I have heard of that, and I know it's like tomatoes, some beans, but yeah, I would recommend Googling it. I personally, like, I tried paleo years ago, maybe like 10 years ago, I think, and there's some things that I kind of stuck to that worked for me. Like, I don't do any legumes at all anymore, and I feel better not eating them, but I think those are on that list.
Yes, yes, they are.
Yeah, those mess me up, except I can still do hummus. I don't know why, maybe because it's blended up and it doesn't have the skin on it. But if I eat like a whole chickpea, like if someone puts chickpeas in a salad, I am a mess after eating that, which is just
Yeah.
so random. But that's a really good tip and suggestion. And I know it's hard to kind of blanket suggestion, but any
Yeah.
other like, yeah, like vegetables, or what can people be doing if they've got the bloating, they can take that
Yes.
out? Is there any other tips or veggies? Should we cook them, or give us your
Yeah.
wisdom?
So I said I could talk about this for a long time, but I think
Oh,
I do want to talk about some of the, there's definitely some evidence linking fresh fruit and vegetables, green vegetables especially, to improving symptoms and also decreasing risk of endometriosis. And there's a lot of, I guess, again, a lot of some research is linking red meat and processed meat. So I would definitely kind of have that as a starting point. Maybe if you are a big red meat or pork or fatty meat eater, perhaps trying to find other protein sources and trying to maybe minimize how often or how much you eat. And it's kind of hard because ketogenic diet is so popular right now,
yeah.
and people are just eating whole burger patties with just cheese because it's high fat, it's high protein.
Right.
And for someone with endo, it might not be the best option, but again, it just, you have to see what works for you. Um, and the other things I just want to, I think, emphasize is the one that's kind of the most recommended is anti-inflammatory diet,
Okay.
which is essentially kind of like almost like it kind of mimics a Mediterranean diet. It's, um, hard cheeses are okay, a little bit of like olive oil, so you really want to get like the monounsaturated fatty acids, more heavy on omega-3s, heavy on plant-based, and then meat sometimes. It's just the general anti-inflammatory because it's, you're eating berries, you're eating more vegetables, fruits that have an antioxidant properties, which then can help with inflammation.
That's really
And
good.
you like cooking methods, I didn't even think about that, but yes, I mean, obviously you want to make sure that if you eat like cruciferous vegetables, which can cause a lot of bloating and gas naturally, you want to make sure that you're cooking them very well. You want to like, there's if you look up cooking methods for like high like gassy foods, you
Mhm.
can kind of see a lot of the different suggestions. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's just something I learned recently that someone recommended to me, because I was like, oh, I'll eat cauliflower, and then I'm like laying in a ball on the floor. So it can set me
Yeah.
off.
It takes some getting used to, and a lot of it is just, sometimes like small exposures to certain foods if you really want to. It did, because it took me a while, like Brussels sprouts. Oh my
I love
gosh, or
Brussels
cauliflower. Me
sprouts.
too.
They're so good, but
Me
they
too.
do not like my stomach if I eat too many. That's for
Too
sure.
many, exactly. And you have to make sure that they're cooked well,
Yeah.
and that you just don't eat too many. And now I've gotten better with like cauli rice, with the cauliflower rice and the
Mhm.
cauliflower crust pizza. It's been a lot better on my stomach since just I think I've just been used to it and kind of
Yeah.
just it just takes a little time sometimes to kind
Small
of get
doses.
away with.
Yeah. What I've been recently just doing, maybe tips for everybody, but I've been just roasting the vegetables. So I just throw everything on a cookie sheet with olive oil and like
Yeah.
rosemary, salt, and pepper, and just, I think I cook it for like 20, it depends on what's in it, but like 10 to 20 minutes. And then it's softer and I feel like I digest it a lot better.
Yes,
What
absolutely.
about eggs? Talk to me about eggs. There's also this like egg myth that women with endo should not eat eggs. Any insight on that? I don't know. There's that medical medium, and he was like, women with endo shouldn't eat eggs. I still eat eggs. I don't see any problems with that. I mostly just do egg whites. But do you know anything about why we shouldn't eat eggs?
I don't. I actually
Okay.
don't. I feel like poor eggs have been just demonized for so many
So
years, and
they're so good. That protein is such a clean protein.
it's a purest sense. Yeah, it's the purest protein. It's the same albumin that they test for in your, you know, you do a blood test for albumin. It's the same albumin protein
Yeah.
um, that's in eggs. And then also there's just so many properties, especially in the yolk, so many vitamins and minerals that are good for you. And that's why, you know, and there's not even a lot of proof that that cholesterol is actually linked to raising your own, you know, cholesterol. So it's
Yeah.
I don't see anything with eggs. I mean, obviously, like I said, I just try to go organic as much as possible.
Yeah.
Try to kind of locally source if you can. But as far as for endo, I look it up now. I'm kind of curious, but I
Yeah.
haven't.
Let us
I
know. But I mean, I think it's only coming from one source. I think it's the medical medium who, I don't follow very closely, but some people are, very religiously follow.
yeah,
I, again, also just tell people you got to test it and see how you feel. Like,
yes,
that's
yes.
pretty much how it is for everything. Okay, what about booze? I feel like alcohol is such a big topic as well. And personally for me, like in my 20s and college, whatever, I felt like I could drink, but I always was like the most hungover person the next day, like could
Mhm.
not handle a hangover. And then as I got older, like it was like one or two drinks and I felt terrible for like 2 days. So now I barely drink, which is kind of a bummer because I also really enjoy a glass of wine.
Yeah.
And so now if I do it, it's very sparingly. But I don't know if you have any insight on that. I know it's inflammatory, and I think beer is probably not the best idea because it has gluten, but I don't know. Any
Mhm.
insight on that?
So there is, I did read a couple of things where it says that alcohol, it does not sit well with about half of women with endometriosis, but then other half were fine. There was actually a study that was interesting, kind of sad, that people with endometriosis actually had a higher consumption of alcohol because they're dealing with just the psychological symptoms and the mental symptoms of what they're going through.
Sure.
So definitely want to make sure that you don't get caught up in that cycle. But it's it has shown to potentially maybe contribute to infertility and potentially a higher risk for endometriosis. So, but nothing that I saw with actual tolerance to alcohol and having that increased hangover feeling. However, I've heard a lot of just endometriosis in the endo community
Yeah.
speaking out about that. So I don't think it's just maybe not out there necessarily in literature as much, but I think it's absolutely something worth paying attention to
Yeah.
if you feel like it's really having that kind of negative effect on you.
Yeah. For
And
sure.
again, like I said, it's very individualized, and I think it's worth trying. And sometimes if you kind of eliminate certain foods or certain things in your diet and then reintroduce them back in, you can kind of see which one's the culprit.
Yeah, you'll know immediately. That's for
Yeah.
sure. I know when I cut out dairy, someone had made cornbread and they're like, "Oh, it's gluten and dairy free. It's great." And the next like that night and the next day I felt terrible, terrible. And I was just like, I remember feeling so sick. And I was like, "What was in that cornbread? You said it was dairy and gluten free, right?" And she was like, "Yeah, it just had butter in it." And I was like, "Oh."
Oh, okay.
But like it was really bad. And I had been eating dairy before, it wasn't that bad, but I hadn't had it in so long. I just had a pretty major like flare up from it. I'm
So you're
sure.
probably having double the effect because first of all, you haven't had it in a long time. So now you're reintroducing something new again, and you've had an intolerance to it in the first place. So you're just getting.
But it was delicious when I ate it. I mean, that was great. But yeah. Okay, I feel like there's so many things that we could talk about. Is there anything else you want to add, or tips or tricks from the dietitian kind of angle that we missed?
I think, well, no, like I said, I didn't want to overwhelm everybody. There's a lot of stuff, but I think I touched upon just to kind of reiterate, just anti-inflammatory diet, making sure that we're staying away from a lot of processed foods. Um, Trying out, like I said, red meat helped me a lot, just cutting that out. And also, I'm not a big fan of meat in the first place. That was kind of didn't affect me as much. But just switching to, kind of being mindful of your environmental pollutants and factors that you're exposed to, like the deodorants, like the parabens, like you mentioned, plastics, things like that, and really just being cognizant of that and maybe changing some of those. And I just, I can't emphasize a plant-based diet, definitely plant-based, fresh, organic, trying to kind of eat clean as much as possible.
Yeah.
And hydration.
Okay,
Yeah.
those are great tips. One more question. I don't know if you'll know the answer to this, but soy, anything with soy I know people say that like soy milk and things like that can also kind of fuel estrogen dominance, but I don't know if you know of any studies
Yeah.
or research on that.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of controversial just research and articles on soy, and not just with endo, but any estrogen dependent cancers or
Sure.
any other, because it does have estrogen like properties, and that's what some of the, I know my fertility physician, it was funny, she was like, it's mixed research, but just stay away from it. But I personally don't feel like, if you eat in its raw form, like tofu or like edamame, obviously not every day, but I think in normal, like in moderate doses, I feel like it's okay. The research has really not been conclusive to show that it actually does contribute to any estrogen dependent diseases.
Okay.
So it's kind of a, if you want to be cautious, I would definitely, just be mindful of like soy additives.
Mm-hmm. Like
Anything
soy
that's,
protein isolate, like I don't even know what that is, but it's in a lot of protein bars. I would avoid that.
it's just soy. Yeah, it's just they isolate the protein from this. Yeah, it's just basically. But I think like just the soy additives in everyday foods, like you might not realize it's in your breads and it's in sauces. Just trying to kind of be more mindful of like the giant ingredient labels, and if there's a lot of stuff in there, just kind of, and soy is usually in there too. So I think just trying to maybe think more focus on eating it in its actual form.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I love tofu and edamame, and I do still eat them in moderation
Yeah.
because those are two of my favorite things. And honestly, if I need protein and I feel really nauseous, tofu is one of the only things that I actually feel like I can get in. And protein shakes. And I drink very clean vegan protein shakes. Definitely research your protein shakes if you do drink protein shakes, because a lot of them are dirty, very dirty, and they have a lot of additive ingredients. But I try to do more of a high protein diet, but I also don't eat red meat. So it's a struggle, and I don't eat pork. But one other thing too that helped me that I'm very bad at doing is chicken bone broth. If you're feeling really nauseous, just have like a mug of that. Has really helped me when I was really struggling to eat or with nausea. It felt like it almost like coated my stomach, and I felt very, very good having that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen some, I've seen, sorry.
Okay, you got a puppy?
Yeah, she's here.
Let's, aw.
I was hoping that it wouldn't
But
get.
dogs are allowed.
Puppies
Dogs
are
are totally allowed on the podcast. Aw.
It's okay. But yeah, bone broth, yes. Oh my gosh.
That's okay. That's so funny.
Sorry about that. Yeah, bone broth. I've definitely seen some articles regarding its health benefits as well. So I think it's something, and it's pretty accessible. So I think it's definitely worth trying.
Sure. Okay, well, thank you, Lily, so much for all of your time and telling us your story and your tips and tricks. And honestly, if you learn anything too more endo related, or if we want to do another episode, I'd love to have you back. I think this information is extremely valuable, especially for people who might be, well, anyone on this journey really, but for people starting out or in the middle that don't know that some of these dietary things actually can really make a significant impact in how they feel. So I thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I will be thinking about you on your journey too, and hoping that you can get surgery sooner than later.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on. And I hope this was helpful. If there's other things we can maybe talk about potentially doing just the endo and diet related.
I think that would be really helpful. Yeah, maybe we can, anyone who's listening, or watching this, if you want to comment in the comments or on iTunes, if you have any more specific diet questions, we can put together a show just specific 100% on diet. But I think this is very good steps to get a lot of people started on the right path. And then if we want to get really technical, I think we could do another episode that's very technical, just so people don't feel overwhelmed. I completely agree with that. It's hard to, we're already not feeling well. It's hard to layer on like, okay, now you have to do these 50 other things, you know.
Exactly.
So good start. Starting with the food diary, I think, is really important. So, okay, Lily, thank you so much.
Thank you.